session of the day, and therefore one of the last sessions of the amazing Astana International Forum. My name is Mikaela Friberg-Story, and I am here as the UN Resident Coordinator of Kazakhstan. Today, I am delighted to have a distinguished panel that will join us as we are going to discuss and learn about the issues related to unlocking the buckle of sustainable trade, the role of digitalization. And to do that, I am very glad to have a distinguished panel, not only of people who are experts, but people who are practically engaging with reality. We need to make sure that we have reality checks. Allow me, therefore, to start by saying a little bit what we're hoping to do here today. We're going to focus our discussion on the digital tools that are available to support the transition to a more green, sustainable policy framework that can support the value chains for Central Asia and the wider world. The events of recent years, and I know that we refer to them in every session of the Astana International Forum, as it relates to COVID, as it relates to the war on Ukraine, and as it relates to the climate change, really puts the spotlight on what we need to do to quickly advance our enablers for reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. Trade is one such thing. Sustainable trade is what we need. And here, the digital world provides us with opportunities. And where better to have this discussion than in Kazakhstan, a country that is making great progress on making use of digitalization to advance its development agenda. Did you know that Kazakhstan is ranked number 28 on the e-government list of the UN and number 15 as it comes to e-engagement and participation of citizens of 193 countries? That says something about how digitalization can unlock the potential and leapfrog development for countries like Kazakhstan. Today, we know that trade cannot be the only driver of change, but it definitely can help us advance the work we are doing. I am therefore delighted to introduce to you our distinguished panelists that will share with us some thoughts, reflections, and maybe even some provocative ideas during today's hour that we have together. Let me then welcome up on the stage to join me, please, first of all, Vice Minister of Trade and Integration of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Mr. Kairat Torebayev. Please, welcome. I'm also very glad that we have the Chairman of the State Bank for Foreign Economic Affairs from Turkmenistan with us, Mr. Zheparov. Please. And from the OECD, I am delighted to have the head of Eurasia Division, Mr. William Thompson. And the last seat on the panel goes to my dear colleague Dmitry Mayasin, who is the Deputy Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Please. Now it is my great honor to introduce to you our keynote speaker. But before doing that, I will inform you that unfortunately, our keynote speaker will have to leave us after her address. So what I'm going to do, and what I'm going to ask the panelists to do as well, is to really listen and dig into what the keynote speaker will share with us so that we bring that forward in our panel dialogue as we move forward during the rest of this discussion. Allow me, therefore, to introduce to you our Undersecretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary for the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, my it is a great honor to introduce to you Madam Ali Shabana, who is here today with us, and we are so glad that you can join us. ESCAP plays such an important role for the development of Central Asia and Kazakhstan. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michaela, for the warm welcome, and also greetings to Excellencies, distinguished participants of the Astana International Forum. It is indeed my great pleasure to deliver these remarks at the start of this very important panel. And again, the title or the theme of which is very, very timely, very important. Unlocking the buckle of sustainable trade, the role of digitalization. Again, digitalization is very big in our region, and not to mention for Kazakhstan, as Michaela already informed at the beginning. It is crucial to recognize that while globalization has been a catalyst in lifting scores of individuals out of poverty in our region, it is an achievement balanced on the principle of an environmental toll. It is impossible to overlook the findings of the recent IPCC report, which points to a rapidly escalating human-induced climate crisis. In order to combat the increase in greenhouse gas emissions, we must evaluate and revise our existing trade and investment policies, as well as practices. The intricate interplay of trade, investment, and climate change demands our thoughtful attention. It is of utmost importance to optimize the positive influences of trade and investment, such as fostering investments in renewable energy and low-carbon technologies. Simultaneously, we must minimize detrimental impacts through innovative approaches like digitalization of trade and transport system, just to name a few as example. The Asia-Pacific region, unfortunately, has been the largest source of greenhouse gas, emphasizing the pressing need, the urgency for a more climate-friendly approach towards trade and investment. As key trading nations contemplate the imposition of carbon border taxes, apprehensions regarding the consequences on developing nations are escalating, with the looming threat of exclusion from important markets. The international community is called upon to honor their commitment, particularly in facilitating access to much-needed technology and finance for developing countries. So this is the ongoing battle, including in the COP negotiations. The promise of digital trade facilitation, such as the implementation of automated customs and paperless trade systems, offers an exciting avenue to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. Our research at ESCAP indicates that each digitalized end-to-end trade transaction could potentially equate to the CO2 absorption of 1.5 million trees, 1.5 trees. This could yield an estimated reduction of 13 million tons of CO2 emissions annually, akin to the absorption capacity or capability of about 400 million trees. So this is from our study or analysis. The potential of paperless trade procedures is immense, more so if trade-related data and documents could be exchanged and legally recognized across borders. The resulting trade cost reductions could range from 10 to 30% of existing transaction costs, contingent on the level of paperless trade development in the participating nations. Moreover, sharing trade transaction information across borders could effectively curb trade-based illicit financial flows, consequently increasing tax revenue. It is therefore very urgent for governments to expedite the digitalization and adoption of customs and trade procedures, harnessing tools and solutions across. Again, this is referring to our or the UN framework and joining the framework agreement on facilitation of cross-border paperless trade in our region, Asia Pacific, which came into effect actually 2.5 years ago, February 2021. So now we are in the process of also facilitating more countries to join. On a closing note, it is crucial to underscore the transformative power of digitalization beyond merely exchanging trade transaction data. Digitalizing economies and trade can facilitate export diversification across various markets and product groups. Yeah, so this is also the major or the very important benefit of trade digitalization. Digital trade in goods and services offers immense opportunities to developing countries, especially landlocked countries such as Kazakhstan and many of the Central Asian countries, as well as LDCs, yeah, the least developed countries, which are looking to structurally transform their economies and leverage the digital or their digital economy. So with those words, again, I sincerely thank you for your attention and look forward to the constructive discussion during this forum. Thank you very much. Back to you, Michaela.
Thank you very much, Under-Secretary General, Madam Ali Shabana, for those thoughtful words that we're going to bring with us as we continue. With that, let us start with our panel discussions. And I'm going to start by turning to our Vice Minister of Trade and Integration here in Kazakhstan, Mr. Torebayev. You've had your position since 2019, if you excuse me. You've had this position since 2019, so you were here during the pandemic and you've seen the shocks that has come and that has hit Kazakhstan and the rest of the world during this period. How do you see it today? How do you see us moving forward, and where do you see the challenges and the opportunities for Kazakhstan? I would love to hear from you some thoughts and reflections on how you see the topic that we are talking on today. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, the pandemic hit the economics of the world quite substantially. It was, though we were seeing this kind of massive impact in some scientific movies, however, nobody really paid attention and their world economy was not ready. So we lived in old normality, now we're living in new normality. So when the pandemic hit, we felt the disruption of a value chain. And value chain, it was so deep that we couldn't recognize it before the pandemic. Apparently, globalization was the thing before the pandemic, and therefore everybody tried to be more engaged into the world economy. So now, still, it's on the agenda of everybody. However, we are paying more attention on self-sustainability. So as Kazakhstan, we are trying to industrialize more efficiently. Because of the pandemic, we felt that the vulnerability of our export is high because raw materials prices fluctuate a lot. And therefore, we put this ambitious goal to reach the exports of processed materials and to reach $41 billion. Of course, to some countries it's not a big deal, but for us it's a huge goal, and this goal has to be achieved by 2025. In this regard, we are trying to focus on a number of things. First one is, of course, agriculture. Agriculture is the key, and it plays an important role in Kazakhstan, and self-sufficiency with agricultural products and exports of these products is a key for a country like Kazakhstan, which is the biggest landlocked country in the world. The second one is, of course, Since down the earth, Kazakhstan is blessed with its rare earth materials, other materials, so raw materials is abundant, and apparently it's no-brainer to process it and to export. Therefore, we'll pay attention on the metallurgy and etc. So, and the third one is services, of course, transport services, and the new big thing is IT services. For remote country from the world markets like Kazakhstan, it's quite important to work on the exports of IT services. And the last one, of course, is textiles, light industries, and etc. So now we are paying more attention to those sectors. If we are talking about the routes that we are trading with other countries, apparently 30% of our exports goes to European Union, the bilateral trade. So the second largest trading partner is Russia, the third one is China. So we see that we have to be more active on other parts of the world. Therefore, we trying to tap on the market of big countries like Pakistan, India, Saudi Arabia, so the Middle East are our priorities for the next years. However, it doesn't mean that we turn our back towards our old markets, it's just tapping on new markets. So in general, this is our goals.
Thank you very much for that. Very clear priorities, both as it relates to products and as it relates to markets. It's very interesting to hear. If we continue then and expand the region and look beyond Kazakhstan, but we stay in Central Asia, I'm delighted to turn to Mr. Zheparov to hear from your perspective from Turkmenistan, where you are as we are talking about the digitalization and trade and unlocking that potential. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to welcome you and express my sincere gratitude for the organizers for providing the opportunity to deliver my speech at the UNEC session at Astana International Forum. I'm so excited to be here. And I would like to congratulate my colleagues from Kazakhstan with the advanced technological level and IT developments in our neighboring brotherly country. And at the present, necessary measures are being implemented in Turkmenistan to digitalize all areas of economy, introduce electronic services, which is great importance for the increasing the competitiveness and the intra-trade as well as within the region. Important steps in the direction of, in these directions were adopted, were the adoption of the concept for the development of digital economy up to 2025. The special program for the development of digital economy has been adopted in my country. This document represents the roadmap for the technological transformation of all sectors of national economy, including the trade. Trade is one of the most important drivers of economic growth in the region, and an important role of aspects of digitalization belongs to this particular area where the foundation of the development of high-level and innovative solutions has been laid. The adopted concept of digitalization involves the implementation of the wide range of comprehensive measures aimed at the development of trade in general and its segments such as e-trade and e-commerce. Already today, we see how these segments are actively developing within the country, which helps to reduce time and transaction cost, and as a result, reduce the cost of goods, services, as well as increase employment, especially among youth. I want to note that in April this year, the Trade Information Portal of Turkmenistan was successfully launched, which provides a step-by-step description of import, export, and transit procedures. This digital platform was developed within the framework of the Ready for Trade Central Asia, European Union project with the technical assistance of the International Trade Center. And it will be useful for potential Turkmen and foreign investors, development partners, international organizations, exporters, importers, customs brokers, and forwarders. The introduction of the digital trading platform in Turkmenistan is another step towards the country's accession to the World Trade Organization, in particular the implementation of the Trade Facilitation Protocol. Overall, Turkmenistan has initiated important developments with regards to the WTO accession process, and I am grateful for the support of international organizations and donors in this process, including the UNEC, which will travel to Ashgabat next week to deliver the seminar on regulatory and procedural barriers to trade, also in context of WTO accession process. And digitalization, given an important focus on the UNEC this year, is an important part of these discussions. Obviously, digitalization opens up broad prospects for the sustainable development of trade, both within the single country and the regional and global levels. At the same time, digitalization plays a key role in such interrelated areas as transport and logistics. In this regard, attaching great importance to the development of efficient use of transport and transit potential of the countries in the region, and interested in studying and adopting international experience in the field of digitalization of transport and logistics. Since this will facilitate the simplification of procedures for the transit of goods in cross-border trade. In recent years, we are actively cooperating in these directions with the UN and its agencies, in particular UNCTAD and UNDP, supporting projects aimed to harmonizing legislation, improving tariff policy, developing the transit infrastructure of the Europe-Caucasus-Asia corridor named TRASECA. The basis for the digitalization of trade and transport links in the framework of implementation of global and regional strategies for the sustainable development is the Memorandum on Cooperation to facilitate the implementation of the project Single Window for Export-Import Operations between Turkmenistan and UNCTAD, UNCTAD. In this regard, for the sustainable development of trade, the issues of digitalization of customs procedure, unifying their agreements and convention, the use of benefits of using TIR, CARNETS ATA, the benefits of maintaining eCMR, CARNETS TIR, and high importance. In this regard, Turkmenistan was pleased to host International Transport and Transit Corridors Forum last month, appreciates the visit of UNEC Deputy Executive Secretary, Mr. Mariasin, in this context. As a representative of banking community, I have to note that the importance of digitalization and use of high technologies in the provision of banking services and products, which also positively affects the development of trade. In this process of digital transformation, legislative work is being improved. It is necessary to develop legislative platform to create a unified digital database, digital economy, introduce electronic document management, as well as invest in the development of enhancement of human capacity building. In solving these and many other issues, technical assistance from international organizations and agencies such as WTO, UNDP, UNEC, and others is important. And we would like to continue to receive such technical assistance for the purpose of accelerating digital transformation of the national economy of Turkmenistan, the development of regional trade cooperation, and facilitation of the achievement of sustainable development goals in the countries of Central Asian region. Dear forum participants, in conclusion, I would like to assure you that Turkmenistan is committed to development of fruitful, mutual beneficial cooperation in trade and other areas of the countries of our region in order to improve the well-being of our people and the prosperity of our states. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Yaparov. And it's interesting when you talk about the digital concept that is already developed to 2025, the roadmap that it comes. And then it's of course, as resident coordinator, I'm delighted to hear of the number of UN engagement that is taking place to support you on this. And I'm sure this is also something that Dimitri will pick up on, and also your request for this continued engagement. And I feel confident when I say that is something that we will all continue with engaging in. So thank you very much for raising those issues. William, when you hear this, you come here, you sit here as from the OECD, of course, trade and economic development is key issues that you're focusing on. How do you see it, the relationship then between trade and digitalization? Are they mutually supportive in this way as you hear it being presented? Please.
Very, very much so. I mean, we've already heard a lot, and I want to reinforce. I mean, the OECD is fully endorses the kind of sense of the benefits of digitalization for trade, and in particular for sustainable trade, coordinating value chains, reducing transaction costs, facilitating the diffusion of ideas, which is absolutely crucial, in many cases reducing corruption opportunities. And we saw during the pandemic how important this was. But what I really want to do for the moment is to flip the question a little bit, because I think we often underestimate the reverse relationship. Digitalization certainly facilitates trade, but trade has a vital role to play in facilitating digitalization and in closing digital divides. And what do I mean? Well, first of all, trade in telecommunications, which will reduce the cost of access to digital networks. Lower tariffs on network equipment reduces the cost of maintaining and expanding digital networks. Trade can enable access, therefore, to digital hardware. Just to give you one particular example, globally, my colleagues back in Paris estimate that around 80% of the value added of computer hardware and related equipment is of foreign origin. Wherever you buy it in the world, on average, 80% of it started somewhere else. It's one of the most globalized networks of value chains around. And that means that reducing barriers to trade in those goods immediately enhances access. Related to that, I think we have to look at the complementary reforms that are required, because digitalization is a process that is transforming economies and societies. It's also being shaped by all of the institutions that shape them, and I want to highlight a few that we think are important. One we've talked about a lot already in the last 2 days is trade facilitation, which could close global connectivity gaps, which are particularly important in this part of the world, by 10 or 15%, if there were a really coordinated approach to converging towards best practice in trade facilitation. Harmonization of rules and protocols, standardization of documents, the establishment of mutual recognition. This is all very low-hanging fruit. And I won't dwell on it because we've heard a lot about it already the last 2 days, but it's there, and it is relevant to the digitalization and sustainable trade agendas. But in addition to that, we have to realize that technology and reform, economic reform, are complements and not substitutes. So when it comes to digitalizing processes, digitalizing public service provision, digitalizing border crossing processes, customs, whatever, it is vital that we optimize them before we digitalize them. One of the things that many of us know from our day-to-day work is that when you digitalize a bad process, you often make things even worse because you remove some of the ability to work around the bugs that human systems might have. You really have to optimize those processes before you digitalize them. I think competition is really vital here, particularly in many of the countries where we work and in some places in Central Asia. Competition in telecoms and IT sectors could be much greater than it is, and lack of competition means that costs for users and consumers remain higher than they need to be. So there is an important role for competition to play, because these are sectors that are often subject to tremendous exercise of market power. Finally, of course, we can't neglect the physical investments that are required. I've been dwelling on the policies because I think sometimes we imagine that the physical investments and the technology will solve everything, but they have to go hand in hand. We discussed yesterday the fact that improvements in trade facilitation in this region have often been associated with rising border crossing times, and that was because the traffic is growing even faster, right? Which is great, but we have to make sure we're keeping pace with that. And I think the last point is to realize that the cross-cutting nature when we talk about digitalization of, say, customs or trade processes has to go hand in hand not only with coherent systems across borders, because it's a problem if your digital customs systems and mine are different and don't really interact well, but even within countries. We've run into instances in countries where what you find is people are not using the digital service options because, for example, the tax authorities still want paper. And if I got to do the paper for the tax man, I'm going to use the paper for the customs agency as well, because otherwise, as some of us know, again from painful experience, when you have paper-based systems coexisting with digital systems, you just end up doing everything twice. So we need to take that very integrated approach. And I'm sure we will get there. The progress we've seen is tremendous, but there's a lot to do, and I just wanted to speak up for the mutuality of that relationship, digitalization and trade. They're evolving together. They're both reshaping our economies and societies, and they are both therefore powerfully shaped by all of the other political policies and institutions that shape them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. I think what you pointed out here, what you really brought to our attention in this here is that the need for that sort of whole of systems approach, the integrated understanding that we cannot just, as you say, we cannot just put digitalization there. We need to optimize before we digitalize to make sure that we are actually getting, to use the expression, as much bang for the buck whenever we make these reforms, because there is investments when we digitalize. So we need to make it very useful. I think we have heard a lot about the opportunities and you know, the roadmaps that are out there and the direction that we are going in. But I think, is it only positive? Is it purely positive? Are there no risks when we talk about digitalization and trade? I know that UNECE focus, of course, a lot on issues that could capitalize on digital transformation for the green economy, and I know that this is something that the UNECE works a lot with. But do you see any risks? Can I put you on the spot with this one, Dimitri, and see if there's something you could help us untangle?
You can always put me on the spot, especially on Friday evening at one of the final sessions of this wonderful forum. But before I talk about risks and opportunities as well, if you allow me, I'd like to thank, because by the end of the event, people may disperse, and I want to make sure that we pause and thank. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Michaela, for being a wonderful moderator, for agreeing to moderate an event that UNECE has proposed to the forum organizers, and to thank you for the support of your office in making this possible. For us, it's a real pleasure to put the agenda of sustainability and digitalization together in this session through a trade perspective, and to have His Excellency the Vice Minister, thank you very much for your long-standing partnership, and of course the Chairman of the State Economic Bank from Turkmenistan, and our great partner Bill from OECD. Now, you asked me a question about risks, but first I want to explain why we named the session how we named it. Sustainable trade, if you live in Geneva and you talk to trade people, is becoming almost the same as just saying trade. Because if you look in the future, if you do foresight for the global trading system, given the immense pressures of climate change, the completely changing behavior of consumers, the younger generation that demands greener products and services, The long-term trend is that sustainability will be the defining factor of competitiveness. So we could also say competitive trade or successful trade, if you want to use the same S at the beginning. I want to really pause and draw your attention to this, dear colleagues. We are not talking about some green tree-hugger trade, small segment of it, maybe 5 years from now. We're talking about a global trend which Central Asia and Kazakhstan would do well to be ahead of the curve on and not catching up on. Yeah. But easier said than done, because cultural realities, realities of the economy, including the energy mix of the economy, the very complex relationship that exists between production, trade, transport, all make sustainability a difficult thing to achieve. And, you know, from the plastic wrapping of any product that gets shipped, so it's not drain and rain when it crosses an ocean, to things like systems that monitor the movement of trucks and the fuel the trucks use and the times at border crossings. These are all elements that play a role. And of course, so do consumer choices. If consumers still want plastic packaging, if consumers want unsustainable products, there will be companies that produce them. Let's be realistic about this. But I'm talking about the trend, and it's there. Now, some of these issues that I mentioned and that colleagues also referred to require digitalization. Again, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, if we had a session on digitalization, we would be talking about frontier issues. Today, no, because the modern economy is already a digital economy, and I don't need to prove this to you. It's just a question of getting each trader, each small and medium enterprise, each government entity which doesn't have digitalization in its name, to actually understand what exactly it can do. And that is challenging. So embracing digitalization is not about having a ministry of digitalization. It is about having the very last department of every ministry understanding the potential of it. So that is one big risk that I see. The second one is what William already referred to, is fragmentation. Digital solutions are a market. As any market, it's competitive. And there are so many of them. Trade facilitation, great example. Proliferation of solutions, systems, platforms that help goods and services move across borders seamlessly is immense. So we are calling with a very simple message, please use global systems. Please use UN standards when possible. And we are very pleased to see that Central Asia is hopefully moving in the right direction, be it when it comes to, for example, data exchange standards for multimodal shipments. Very complex, I know, but that's a very important part of how goods move seamlessly, to electronic TIR, the famous tier convention. You remember the trucks with the tier sign that are moving across the region. Now it's going to be digital, and Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Turkmenistan hopefully will accede to e-digital tier this year. We're working with all three governments, with the customs offices there. If that happens, we're going to have a real, well-functioning corridor based on global legal norms. So that is one, and by the way, European Union, very often the game changer in global markets, European Union has embraced both the electronic tier and the CFAC standards of EUNIC. For example, the latter coming as part of the electronic freight transport information system that EU is deploying as of 2025. Very concrete example, but fragmentation is a risk. We have solutions. Second, digitalization can make a real difference when it comes to the efforts to decarbonize trade. We heard a lot about carbon neutrality, decarbonization, climate objectives. But what does it mean specifically when you are, for example, a textile producer? Well, I can tell you we have a fantastic program running with the European Union funding in Uzbekistan, where with the use of blockchain, DNA markers, by the way, I had not known that DNA markers can be used for traceability before I learned about this project, but they can, where each T-shirt produced in Uzbekistan can now be traced with a verifiable information system. Okay, we are just starting. It's a pilot. It's going to grow economy-wise. wide, and I invite all Central Asian countries to replicate this excellent experience, which is making textile sectors much more transparent, and that came in Uzbekistan after the cotton pledge was removed, so there was a very good moment. And then consumers in Europe pay more for a t-shirt that is produced using circular or sustainable methods and that is traceable. So traceability means also higher price, good business, so there is a strong business case for traceability. And this traceability using blockchain, for example, has a very direct link to the future of restrictive measures that are linked to carbon that are coming, for example, from the European Union, but as well as other big players in the form, for example, of the carbon border adjustment tax, which we already spoke about at another session, so I will not repeat. And third one, again, the risk here, Michaela, is thinking that these climate imperatives and carbon trading and decarbonization have nothing to do with the industries of today. But in fact, I was taking very careful notes. Vice Minister mentioned three areas: agri-food, critical raw materials, and textiles. Well, guess what? We are about to launch a big partnership with the European Union to have traceability based on blockchain in all three areas. So stay tuned for that. So solutions exist, but awareness needs to be there as well, even in the most traditional of industries. Finally, I want to emphasize the importance of what William was talking about, diffusion of ideas. We need innovation. We can't just assume that the digital solutions for sustainable trade for Central Asia exist already in Europe or elsewhere and that we just need to copy-paste them. That is not the case. Central Asia needs to come up with its own set of solutions, building on the creative capacity of people here, startup communities, and other players. So one example I'll give you is the platform economy in Central Asia. When I had the pleasure of meeting Minister of Economy of Kyrgyzstan not so long ago in Geneva, he told me about the ambitious plans to create a logistics hub for the future Amazon or Alibaba, let me be neutral here, of Central Asia. Imagine the market of 5 countries coming together with a consumer base of quite a few tens of millions of people able to get their Amazon package with the same speed as we can in Europe. Just imagine this for a minute. That's high quality of life. This is access to services. This is access to knowledge, because books is what Amazon started with, by the way, right? So what would it take to do that? Well, first you need the Amazons of this world to partner up, but I think they're doing this. I think they're driving this change. But you know what you need most? You need an agreement between countries on e-commerce regulation, so that a package coming through Amazon to your doorstep in Bishkek takes as long to come from a logistics hub next to Bishkek as it would if the logistics hub, the storage, would be next door, but far away, next to Tashkent, for example. What would it take? What kind of integration? What kind of mutual recognition of standards and norms would it take? So the big risk is that opportunities like this, with massive employment opportunities, are being mixed by Central Asia if it doesn't embrace common action, integration, a view of this as one big internal market, which I think could drive sustainability as well, because you know what is the trendiest topic in EC right now is platform economy for circular economy. I will not dwell on it because this is quite a long topic, and Mikhail is already looking at me nervously because I'm taking way too long. But in a nutshell, imagine the power of Amazon or Alibaba to play a role in what needs to happen, a revolution of reuse of what we carry with us, of the materials we have in our hands and our homes. Right now we throw them away and we hope some of it gets recycled. What if it's picked up by the courier who brings you the next package, and picked up and delivered to a facility which employs thousands of people that disassemble this phone, which is a source of critical minerals, by the way, which are essential for green transition, by the way, too. Phone just being one example. So imagine you reverse engineer the Amazon system to collect things from people, not just deliver things to people. Could Central Asia be a testing bed for this? Do not tell me it is not culturally appropriate here. Do not tell me the economy is not ready, because it is about leapfrogging. It is about trying failing, trying again, and succeeding ultimately, and positioning this region on a highly competitive edge, digitalization and sustainable trade together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I really take away some of the things you were saying, and not least on the green premium, which is a challenge globally for getting consumers to go green on this. But I'd actually like to turn to our Vice Minister and hear from you some of the reflections, not only maybe on the location of this potential hub for accessing a market of almost 80 million consumers. I think there might be more interested parties to that. We'll leave it at that. But I know that there's initiatives in Kazakhstan also looking at this circular economy. So please, Vice Minister, share some thoughts on this, please.
Thank you, Michaela. Well, I would like to dwell upon 2 points that you have mentioned. The digital economy is growing quite rapidly in Kazakhstan. So you mentioned Amazon, Alibaba. Well, those are stars, of course. We have new star in China, which is called GD.com. We just recently signed contract with them, and so we delivered, as we thought, we delivered goods for like a good 3-4 months, just for the beginning. It's worth of $10 million. So when the marketing started, we didn't expect the speed of the light. It was like in half day, we sold out those products for $10 million. And now we are facing the problem that we have to source the goods from Kazakhstan. And we're thinking about how we tackle this logistics issue. So therefore, it's quite important for us to have the platform, as you said, and to work seamlessly without any stitches with China, so we can send goods from Almaty to the consumer in China. And this is quite important for us. The second thing you mentioned, that buying things from, getting things from the consumers, not delivering. Well, we have some kind of inception it's at inception stage. Well, we have this platform developed especially for collecting recycled materials. So any person in Kazakhstan using their mobile phone can ask any company nearby to pick up their recycled materials like plastic, glass, and paper. So it's still at inception stage, but we are going to do it. And it will use also blockchain technology in order to locate whether its product was sourced from this gentleman or another one. And so we are doing it. It's, I think we can share this experience among the Central Asian countries, and I believe it has the future. We see a bright future for this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And that's music to my ears. As a Swede, I'm brought up with recycling, and it breaks my heart every time that I am not recycling a bottle or a can or a paper box. So I definitely look into how to do that better here. I see that we already have comments and questions from the floor. So I think we had do we have a microphone? No microphone, yes? Okay. It's coming. Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Sorry. Thank you for this interesting topics and discussions. Unfortunately, I totally disagree with the name of the session. I think, first of all, yes, I agree that Kazakhstan is a unique country. It's the 9th largest country. It's the most biggest Muslim country, north located in the world, most biggest landlocked country in the world. But I think, in my personal view, we have wrong investment and the trade policy, because it's purely and deeply interconnected, interlinked, because as we see this structure of the whole foreign direct investment in Kazakhstan, is 95% of this directed and invested to the raw material. If we see that trade structure of the Kazakhstan also dominated by the raw materials. I think as the art of the economy is not trading the raw material. We need to trade with the value-add product of the Kazakhstan, made in Kazakhstan. Probably that's why we have high rate of the unemployment rate in Kazakhstan. Probably that's why we have a high rate of the devaluation, inflation rates in Kazakhstan, because our foreign trade dominated by the raw material. That's the first issue, and unfortunately, we don't know what does mean trade wars. Trade wars exist between allies like US and Japan, US and Korea, China, EU, and etc. We are peaceful, peace-loving country, and we don't like so-called any wars, even trade. So that's why we can, we unfortunately trading mostly with the raw material. That's the main huge source of all social tensions in Kazakhstan. So that's why I think we need an absolutely new philosophy of the trade policy of the Kazakhstan. All investment in Kazakhstan not located to produce the value-add products like IT, furniture, machinery, everything. And just now, Vice Minister confirmed that during the pandemic time, we've been vulnerable because all the price for the raw material totally decreased, and we experienced one of the biggest deficit of the trade and etc. So my question is, my remark is, first of all, to OECD and the UN for others to start to promote so-called export. We need more exporting in Kazakhstan. All investors coming to Kazakhstan should export their own products. We have, unfortunately, for example, this French helicopter producer, Eurocopter. They invested in Kazakhstan, but you can sell these helicopters only in Kazakhstan. You cannot trade with even neighboring countries. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous, yeah. Yeah, and many others. So we need to cultivate culture of exporter. We need to cultivate the culture of the exporting country, not only the raw material. It's not a long-rich tradition.
Thank you very much for that. And I think that actually, from what I'm hearing you saying, is echoing also the diversification of the trade that we heard on the 4 points on agriculture, including service and IT and transport. So I hear that the ideas of diversification is here very clearly. But I will open the floor if there are reflections from the panel on this issue. Yes, please, Vice Minister, of course.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, if I may, I answer in Russian, since there are a lot of terms that I might interpret incorrectly.
Yesterday, when several days ago with my colleagues from the organization of UN, we launched the project on the evaluation of the regulatory and procedural barriers to trade. It's basically a certain response to all the challenges that we are currently facing as Kazakhstan. So we did it with distinguished Mikhaila. Also in Kazakhstan, we maintaining the project called Eskata UN, which is all about the paper-free trade, transborder paper trade. And also we're talking about the technical and legal preparedness of Kazakhstan. Our colleagues from United Nations and from Skata UN will definitely confirm it. We're also working in this regard with OECD. Currently, the ministry is organizing the second phase of the trade connections with the Central Asian states, which will be basically the supportive measure of the transport. This will be connected with the flows, and we already finished the first phase of the projects in 2019. Also, we're maintaining the research with USAID in the regard of the promotion of the trade in Kazakhstan. So basically, the idea behind it is the following. The exporter who made the decision about the exporting the certain good, for example, he woke up in a good mood and he was like, okay, I will export certain things, and he's supposed to have all the regulatory documents till the lunch break, and after that, he or she will address to the transport company. We already having this investigation with several projects, within the several projects, all the activities that are being implemented from our ministry, working together with the ministries and with the international organizations who both presenting here, is basically all about the expert. Also, in May 2023, we launched the Central Asia Gateway Portal, which unites the portals in terms of procedure facilitation of the all Central Asian states and actually gives such an outstanding easy access to all the actors. This is one of the examples of everything that we're implementing together with ministry. If we talk about the integration, we formed for about 20 different tools. I'm so sorry, Mikhail, for taking so much time. So as promoter, I have to say that we're doing quite a lot of things in this regard, really. And maybe no one or not many people notice it, and sometimes they misinterpret the statistics from different angle, not the angle that we use in our ministry. But if we will talk about the value of the produced goods within every country and consumed in each particular country, Kazakhstan is one of the champions in the world in terms of the export, and everything that we already produced and maintained as export, we already had a chance to go along with Turkey, Vietnam, China, and we already ahead of these states. Everything that we need currently is to produce more and to work in the procedures of the facilitation of the trade. So basically all the activities that we're already implementing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Vice Minister, and it's clear that there is a lot going on. We have more questions from the floor, please. Can we have someone assisting with the microphone? Thank you so much. Please introduce yourself and pose your question.
For this interesting discussion. My name is Nurlayim Jaxabayeva. I am a research fellow at Nazarbayev University. I'm researching circular economy and entrepreneurship. My questions, I will address it to Mr. Thompson and Mr. Mariasin, because I believe international organizations is more qualified to answer to these questions. How to balance willingness to increase trade amounts and being sustainable in the case of developing countries like Kazakhstan and other Central Asian countries? Because as Vice Minister Mr. Turebayev mentioned, Kazakhstan, for example, has a goal to reach 41 billion in its own exports. But it's also important to do it in a sustainable way, not to go for the big numbers only to reach the growth for the growth itself. And also as European Union, as a main partner for Kazakhstan and the European consumers' willingness to have green, sustainable, not only in production and in trade, but also in the way of delivering these goods, in the logistics and supply chain in general. How to get this kind of balance for the developing countries when they are also limited in their resources to make additional investments for the technologies and etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have a volunteer taker? Bill, I see that you're leaning forward and taking notes.
Yeah,
That's a good start.
I'll take that up. I want to comment on the previous question as well, though, if I may. First of all, let's put the problem in perspective. Kazakhstan undoubtedly needs to diversify production, employment, and exports. And in particular, it needs to create more high productivity jobs, because the most competitive sectors in the economy, the big exporting sectors, are very capital intensive. They don't generate enough employment. That is undoubtedly the case. Nevertheless, this is the kind of conversation that many other countries would love to have. Let us not underestimate the degree to which Kazakhstan's strength in the primary sector has delivered prosperity for the country. It isn't enough, and the age of hydrocarbons is passing. I think the next challenge, in addition to diversifying into outside of the primary sector, has to be said, is sustainable mining, because we know we're going to need a lot of these minerals, hard minerals, rather than hydrocarbons, for the net zero transition. Lithium, other critical minerals, rare earths. But we need also at the same time to realize that that's not just mining products for sustainability, that needs to be sustainable methods and technologies of mining. So I don't want us to knock back too hard on the primary sector, but we are at the OECD working, as the Vice Minister noted, we're working with his ministry on export promotion, we're working on trade facilitation, and of course underlying that there has to be attention to, in the domestic economy, to creating the conditions for these things to emerge. Now, coming to the question of our colleague from Nazarbayev University, above all, what we will have to see is the adaptation to trade that prices carbon in. And this is going to have effects that I don't think people fully appreciate. I'll tell you why. Years ago, when people started looking at this, if you actually look at transport costs as a share of the value of goods that are traded, the gross value of imports and exports, they're remarkably small. That's why we trade so much. Transport is cheap. If you build in the carbon footprint of that transport and you price it properly, the cost of transport goes up. It is still relatively small, so a lot of the early studies were saying, this isn't a big deal. It will affect trade flows a bit, but this is fine. At the OECD a number of years ago, we began working, though, on trade in value added, reflecting the fact that a lot of imports are re-exported, a lot of this trade is part of complex value chains. Give you a simple example. At one point, I don't know what the numbers are now, but a number of years ago I read, you buy an iPhone produced, notionally imported to the United States from China, 90% of the value of that iPhone originated in the United States. 10% was done because it is actually cheaper to send the components and the patents and everything else to China to do the final production, pack it up, and ship it back. Once you start thinking in terms of trade and value added rather than gross flows, then the carbon footprint of the trade matters. So we're going to see some important changes, and they're going to be hard to predict. They'll create opportunities for some, costs for others. But if we really get serious about carbon pricing, I don't think it'll cause global value chains to unwind, but it will become a powerful factor that starts to change them. But it will also create tremendous opportunities for anybody in the circular economy, because right now the green premium is something that people like me who can afford it in well-off countries are willing to pay. Once the green premium is no longer a premium, once the green premium is the reality because we have started properly pricing carbon and realizing that trade and production have to be on a more sustainable footing, not just relying on the goodwill of the consumer, we're going to be in a very different place in the world. And I think at that point, the opportunities are tremendous. I think for Kazakhstan, it's difficult to see what sectors will develop, but I would stress, the framework conditions and the skills, in particular for weightless goods and services, especially services. Global trade in goods growth has been slowing for a long time, and that's partly because our growth has been slowing, but it's also partly because as the world gets richer, more of what we consume is services, not goods, and global trade in services has tremendous unrealized potential. And for countries like this one, that potential is absolutely critical. And I better stop there and let Dmitry take the baton.
Well, first of all, of course, you're asking a very difficult question. So we don't really know the answer, how to balance. No. But I'd say three things. First is strategic foresight. One needs to be bold enough to imagine the unimaginable. 26 years ago, just think about it. 26 years ago, Google didn't exist. Just think about it. No Google. Yeah? So 26 years from now, Kazakhstan may be a global leader in an area we have never heard about. Yeah? Second, how do we find out what that is in time so that another country is not? Invest in people. It's a very simplistic answer, akin to what the Prime Minister of Uzbekistan told us yesterday, do the work or just work. Well, it's much easier said than done because it's not just about R&D and scientific discovery. It starts from very, very early on. It starts from social skills, from people being able to work in teams, people being able to overcome stigma and discrimination and, and have a society that is enabling open dialogue and real innovation. Paradoxically, this may be the most important thing Kazakhstan can invest in today because it can never guess what the next big thing is. But to have a Google born in Kazakhstan, you need to invest in that. You need to have environment of a Silicon Valley type to then have that Google where you wouldn't need to worry about hydrocarbons anymore. And then, well, third one, honestly, it's understanding. It's really in line with what William is saying. Understanding the market better, and it sounds easier to sell dirtier products. Yeah, it sounds easier. Just export oil and gas, but it may be much more profitable to sell something else, to invest and to rethink what you're selling, and ultimately it will bring added value, which is the most important thing that anybody devising economic policy and any business needs to be thinking about. So yes, it is about market analysis as well, and I must say the government of Kazakhstan is taking amazingly bold steps in this direction, really trying to position, trying to diversify, trying to work on different options, and by the way, being one of the most active countries in the World Trade Organization, having just chaired the ministerial. So we see real leadership, real potential there, including on sustainable trade, and I think our job is to support this moment.
Thank you very much. We have 5 minutes left, and I know that the Vice Minister wants to come back in here, but if you allow me, I will allow William 30 seconds so that you get to have the last word as we are moving on, if that's okay. So William, very briefly.
Might be more than 30 seconds, but I just want to endorse what Dmitry just said about not knowing what the next big thing is. And my favorite country in this is Finland. In 1990, cellular telephony was like nowhere in anybody's technology foresight strategy for Finland. It was barely in existence, and it wasn't much there. By 2000, Nokia has exploded. Finland is taking over the world in cellular telephony in 10 years. Nobody saw that coming, and 10 years more, the iPhone appears on the market. Nokia takes a powerful hit. It's dramatic for Finland, but the country continues to prosper. One of the side effects of it happens to be Angry Birds. And things like it. Why? Precisely because not only do they invest in people very effectively, they invest in framework conditions. And so the resilience and adaptability of the Finnish economy, the ability to adapt and prosper in those unexpected developments really does tell very well why the fundamentals really pay off over time.
Thank you very much for that, and I think you're right, and thank you for reminding me about Angry Birds. I spent far too much time on that. So with that, allow me then to have the final words from you here before we close our energetic panel discussion. Please, Vice Minister Turbayev.
Thank you. So I'm taking too much time here. Before I build on the arguments of Dmitry and Bill, first remark, it's $41 billion. It's not exports of all products, it's just processed products. The second thing I wanted to say that some of you might have read the very diversified idea, I should say, the book of the Mr. Haju Chang. He was a guest of this forum like 3 to 5 years ago. he brought an argument like kicking back the ladder. So the rich countries now, it's his words, not mine. The rich countries now, they use dirty technology and polluted everything, so they grew and now they're growing the bars for everybody else. So they are kind of closing the doors for developing countries. So it very much in line with your argument that how we will develop since the bars are growing. So in my opinion, it's not how we will grow. It means that when the bars are upper, so there are less competition. And Kazakhstan is a very disciplined country, so we put the goal to become carbon neutral by 2060. It means that massive investments will go into green technology, and we will be more competitive than other countries which are less disciplined than Kazakhstan. So with this wonderful idea, I want to close my speech. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, our hour is up, and I think this hour has really allowed us to make a circular economy of our seminar. We have moved beyond talking about the digitalization of trade, and we have highlighted the importance of investing in people, working with foresight, making sure that we diversify our economies and that we start to have that green premium, because maybe that will also drive the diversification as we're moving forward. I also like to really pick up what you said on making sustainable mining, because where resources are, they should be used for the benefit of the people in a sustainable way. And this is, of course, a key aspect for our host country to look into, and we know that this is a priority. Finally, let me just say that 2 years ago, the UN survey on sustainable and digital trade facilitation indicated significant progress in the region. And the new survey is being launched later on this year. And I am convinced that we are going to see even more progress as we are moving forward on this. So I'm sure that when we meet for the second Astana International Forum, we can take stock of that survey. And I will be delighted if I could be accompanied by the same distinguished panel. Mr. Sheparov, thank you so much for being with us. Bill, a pleasure as always. And let me then finally, and in a joint session, thank both our Vice Minister Torbayev for hosting us here at the Astana International Forum, and of course my dear colleagues from the ECE, Dimitri, and your entire team for making this side session possible as we're here. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. With this, we close.
And by the way, it was live streamed and watched by many people online, and I'd like to pay special tribute to Elizabeth Turk, Ariel Ivanier, and Nadezhda Sporoshova, who made this session possible from the ECE side. Thank you very much.
Thank you.